So it certainly seems like a case, Jason, and this may be why it took so long. And it wasn't one of these Billy Napier to Florida, like as soon as we heard about it, within a couple hours, boom, the next day, signed, sealed, delivered. He's the guy. That from the Oklahoma perspective, yeah, that there was possibly the conversations, or not possibly, it's pretty well confirmed, the Dabo Sweeney pursuit first and foremost. And then even beyond that, that while Brent Venables has made it pretty clear, I think, in many conversations over the years. So as a defensive coordinator, think about it this way, folks, that he interacts with the media far less than the head coach, but the offensive and defensive coordinators, depending on your school, but at a big time program like Clemson, usually meets with the media maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, something. So he has a number of interactions within the season and through the rest of the offseason with the media. So obviously, with him being one of the top defensive coordinators in the country at those two positions, and with all the coaching opportunities that have been out there throughout his tenure, he's brought up constantly and been asked that question. And he's never said, I will never be a head coach, I only want to be a coordinator. But based on his responses, it's been obvious that he needed the right fit, that he wasn't just desperate to be a head coach somewhere, that he was fine being the defensive coordinator at Clemson, and maybe that's the way his career would have concluded. So he was looking for the right fit. For anybody who turns down the head coaching job at Auburn, obviously there's probably only 10 or 15 jobs that you're going to take in the country. And for him, it might have only been a few, or maybe for him, maybe it's only one. Right. Maybe this was the job. We talked to Jason recently with our Clemson guy, Jason Priester, a number of times about this. And he said he wasn't guaranteeing that Brent Venables would not leave Clemson because he knew that he had ties to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, obviously an enticing offer from one of the very top programs in the country. But in that, he's a family man who actually moved, whether it was his parents or in-laws, all the way from Oklahoma to Clemson, bought them a home, set them up, had children in high school and college at Clemson University, in the local high schools, participating in sports there. And for anybody who has a family, has children, understands how difficult it is, a decision to uproot them, especially at that age. We're not talking about 3 and 4 year old kids. We're talking about kids that are heavily involved in their schools and friends and all of that. And so you almost get the feeling that this was the job and no other job would do.
It's a very interesting conversation, Mark. When this search happened, when the search started, I'd heard some noise about maybe potentially, hey, Venables is very, very happy with what he's doing at Clemson from a defensive coordinator perspective. I even heard the fact that he has no interest at all, even at this point, thinking, okay, I think he's 51. At this point in my life, will I have an opportunity for this? So I think to your point, Mark, I think he is very happy and satisfied. But I think some of the things that I heard early on was that this was not saying that this was the only job that he would be interested in. Certainly, if Dabo was to leave for somewhere else, I think that would have been a job that he would have been interested in. But if you turn down Auburn's a really, really good job, right? So you turn down a team in a program like that. It's it kind of makes you think: does he really want to be a head coach? And is the comfort level very low pressure? His defenses have been dynamic since he's been. I think the worst. I was reading something yesterday. I think the worst his defensive team has finished is 7th in the country in total defense since he's been there. So, but another thing that I heard kind of midweek, Mark, this week was that people that have talked to him has said this is his dream job. This is the job that really ultimately that he that he wanted, and heard through some sources that I've had, that he ultimately would, without question, take the job if Oklahoma offered him. So, and I think you brought up a good point, Mark, that in some of these jobs, it's been very quick to, I think, what Oklahoma did. I think from what I've heard, I think they settled on Brent. Not well. That's the wrong choice of words. They're not settling, but I think they made the decision that they wanted. This is the direction that they wanted to go. Probably midweek, from what I'm hearing, probably Wednesday, Thursday timeframe. This is where they wanted, but I think at the end of the day, they wanted to be very diligent in making sure, okay, this is the guy that we think that we want, but let's continue to go through this process and make sure that this is exactly who we want to have as our coach. So, and I think they got to that point with maybe some of the decisions, or some of the discussions, and some of the conversations that they had later in the week, and then over the weekend as well.
13 seasons at Oklahoma as defensive coordinator or co-defensive coordinator. It's it's mighty impressive what he has done both there and, as you mentioned, at Clemson, statistically ranking in the top 5 consistently. At Clemson, you can say what you want about the schedule, but most of those teams then went on to playoff appearances and proved, probably his crowning achievement, I would think off the top of my head, at Clemson, was facing an Alabama team that was consensus number 1 in the 2018 national championship game, Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback, all those consider 4 first-round wide receivers on that team, and Najee Harris in the backfield, a first-round running back in the backfield, and an NFL offensive line. 16 points. I think 16 points in the first quarter, and that was it.
Yep.
Done.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember, of course, and you will as well, that the move that was made to bring him to Clemson was off the heels of, so this is Dabo Swinney, not being the Dabo Swinney that we know now, being this wide receiver coach who was elevated to the Clemson job, who was off to a nice start, had a 6-7 season, then he really got it going. They won the ACC championship. They went to take on Geno Smith at the Orange Bowl and got annihilated. They gave up 70 points in that game. And I remember watching that game, and it was one of those deals where it was about 45 in the second. Like, it could have been maybe 100. Like, it just settled on 70 because they didn't need any more. They were torn to shreds badly. And immediately they're going after Brent Venables. He comes in within a year or two. They've got a top flight defense. Just coaching in college football is enormous. That's all there is to it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And a lot, it's kind of funny during these coaching searches. There's the rumor mill churns so hard, and I think we talked about this a little bit off air, talking about the Alabama Georgia game. Well, there was a, and this happens from time to time. I think a lot of what happens with these online publications, there was a site, an Oklahoma site, that inadvertently released Dan Lanning had been named the head coach at Oklahoma, and it was, so there was rumors about that, and then they retracted that pretty quickly. However, then on the top of that, there was some, maybe that's why Georgia's defense played so horribly. He was, had kind of one foot out the door and one foot in. So, but no, I think, the point that you make about, Venables going to Clemson, and we talked about this from the Oklahoma perspective. It was very interesting, when this happened, because, Mike Stoops had been brought back to Oklahoma by Bob after, after Mike's stint in Arizona as the head coach, and Brent was the single defensive coordinator. Had been a co-defensive coordinator situation before, and he had, I know from a lot of people that he had a lot of heartburn deciding what to do. there was a situation where he kind of went and then decided to come back and then decided to go, and ultimately I think it was probably the right decision. Certainly was the right decision for him based on what he was able to do at Clemson. But yeah, no, you're right. Coaching, I mean, how critical is coaching? I mean, even at a positional coach, a coordinator, whatever it is, especially at the college game, it's incredibly important to being successful. And I think obviously the hope is Venables will be able to rekindle some of that. Um, Obviously, bring some of that defensive, kind of knowledge and what he's been able to do at Clemson over, back to Oklahoma, and then certainly maybe improve to where they've been over the last 3 or 4, even I mean even longer than that, even pre Riley. So I think it'll be interesting to see how quickly he, along with his staff, is able to kind of turn that around. And I think, the one thing that Bob had mentioned, it's very, we had talked about this, Mark, that it felt like, I mean, at least from my perspective, last Sunday, it almost felt like Oklahoma was going on probation. The fact that they're losing so many staff members, they're losing so many recruits, existing players within the team. But I think, Bob was very instrumental in how he addressed the media on talking about, this is still a 10-2 team. It's not like this is a 3-9 or a 4-8 team. There's not a whole lot. Maybe there's some cultural things that needs to be rebuilt, and some toughness areas and some strength areas that has struggled for a while. But I think that Oklahoma's in a good spot to certainly still be competitive. Maybe they probably don't come in with maybe the trajectory that they had this year in 2022, but still they're in a really good spot. A lot of great players.